Okay, so I talked about the voltage, talked about current, which is amps, the number of amps you can draw off the cells. So how does that affect you? How does it change your outlook on buying a light, or what kind of batteries you want to run, etc. We've been over the various advantages and disadvantages to some of the cells. Some have higher capacity, some allow higher current, some of them have a very long shelf life, etc., etc. But sometimes you're restricted by more than that. Sometimes the light that you're looking at has a voltage range or a current range restriction that will force you to decide between maybe just one or two different chemistries. A very, very common scenario are lights that run on two CR123 cells in series. So these two cells, and I neglected to mention this earlier, but primary lithium CR123s are actually 3 volts instead of 1.5. So they're double the voltage of the lithium AA. And that makes a big difference, because you're talking now about 6 volts when you've got both of the batteries in series instead of 3 volts. A lot of lights. If you saw my P60 compatible lights video, the last one I made, you know that this format, the two CR123A lights, is very common for use in P60 lights like the Solar Force, or this Surefire, or the MD2, the Malkoff that we talked about just a second ago. These lights are designed to take usually 2 CR123s from the factory, and they expect that people will be using these cells in this configuration. Now, one alternative to this, assuming your voltage is okay, is to use a single 18650. Now, this, when you put two cells in series, you're doubling the voltage. But you're draining both these cells now at a faster rate. So you're actually cutting down on your capacity when you're using 2 cells in series than when you're using a single cell that just has a higher capacity. So you get more runtime on the 18650. Now, we talked a little bit before about, for example, this Surefire light doesn't come from the factory board to accept an 18650. It will take 2 of these 123s in series, no problem, but it won't fit an 18650 because of the 2 extra millimeters diameter. Now, again, you can get these lights bored to accept them, not this G2, but a typical, for example, aluminum Surefire. You can get this bored out to accept a larger cell, or you can purchase one that's already been bored. Or you can look at lights like the Solar Force, which is a clone of the Surefire it already comes with an 18mm battery tube ready to accept an 18650. The Malkoff does as well. There are some other clones and some other P60 lights, and then just some other factory lights that are not P60 compatible, but the manufacturer knows you're going to use the 18650 cell, so they make the tube diameter a little bit larger. The problem is that not every manufacturer creates a light with a driver circuit that will work with an 18650 because the voltage is a little bit too low. So if they're intending the voltage range for that light to be, for example, 5 to 10 volts, for example, you won't be able to use an 18650, which at its peak, freshly charged, is only delivering 4.2 volts, whereas your 2 CR123 cells in series give you 6 volts, which satisfies that minimum voltage. In particular, this light right here, I have a Malkoff LED in there, or an XML LED. This is a M91 drop-in. This won't run on a single 18650. In fact, this light won't even run on 2 CR123s in series. It requires 3 cells. That's why it's living in my 3-cell, my 9P host right now. So the minimum voltage range for this is actually in excess of 6 volts. Now, some lights, that's not true. This Solar Force, for example, has a very, very wide voltage range. The stock Solar Force drop-in that came in here was 3 volts to 18 volts. So that's just a tremendous range. You can run anywhere from a single 18650 like this to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, etc., CR123s, and not exceed the voltage range. There tends to be a correlation between the efficiency of the driver and the width of the voltage range that the driver, or that the drop-in of the light engine will accept. A lot of lights that have a very wide voltage range like this, they have to make some sacrifices to accommodate very wide voltage ranges, and they have, as a result, much lower efficiency, or noticeably lower efficiency than a light that was designed, to take a very narrow voltage range. So, 3.7 to 5.2 volts, for example. Basically, that's a light that's asking you to use specifically an 18650. A much more common scenario is a voltage range, between 3.2 volts and 9 volts, where you can use anywhere between a single lithium ion up to 3 CR123A primaries, or 3 lithium primaries in general. So when you're looking at a light, it's worth looking at the specs to see what the intended voltage range is. And also the diameter of the battery tube. If the light has a battery tube diameter that's meant to accept an 18650, usually the manufacturer will advertise that fact. It tends to be a plus. It's something, you can use either 2 primaries or an 18650. Now, some lights will use, I have, for example, this battery tube extender right over here. This is an extender that's meant to screw onto either a Surefire or a Solar Force type light that gets you 2 extra cells. So, for example, if you screw this on here, this is actually a 9P instead of a 6P, but imagine now I can use multiple 18650s in series. So, rather than using multiple CR123s in series, I'm 4 of them, for example, I'm using 2 18650s, which will still increase my capacity. So I'm getting more capacity by using the 2 of these in series than I am by using 4 of these in series. But sometimes the minimum voltage requirement will require you to use 3 or 4 of the CR123s in series. So I guess the message here is, just pay attention to the minimum voltage requirement for the light you're purchasing. And also think about what your goal is. If you want to be able to cut down on your costs, and for a lot of people, Reddit's a pretty international community. We've got some people who are not in the United States, or who are not in places that otherwise make it affordable to buy these lithium primary cells. I mean, these are expensive here, and they're made here. So, I'm trying to imagine some of the Redditors out there from other countries that walk into a store and see these for sale for these astronomical prices, or just have a hard time even getting them. And of course, there are restrictions now on mailing lithium batteries because of some safety concerns that somebody decided was worth putting a restriction on the ability to mail these. It's very, very hard for companies to ship them or to get them to places that don't manufacture them. So these batteries get very expensive. So if that's the case where you're at, and you want to try to look for a light specifically that runs a rechargeable lithium-ion battery, so that you can get yourself a battery and a charger, and really be set for a long time, all 1,500 or 2,000 recharge cycles or whatever this is, that's a way to save a lot of money, and to a lot of people that's very desirable. I tend to do that whenever I can. I have some lights where the voltage requirement won't allow me to use an 18650 or whatever my other equivalent lithium-ion cell is, so I end up using primaries instead. But generally, that's in cases where I can't get away with it because of the voltage requirement, and otherwise I would be using lithium-ion cells. I mentioned chargers, and I'll talk about chargers just very briefly. I'm kind of running out of time here. This is an example of a lithium-ion charger. This will accept an 18650. There's little spacers you can put in there, so it'll accept smaller cells. But this particular one is a Pila charger. It's very, very popular among flashlight enthusiasts. It tends to be highly recommended. Apparently it analyzes the cells to see what the capacity is, how much charge is left, and it charges them at the maximum charge rate that's appropriate for the cells without compromising the cells, overcharging them. If you're charging NIMF cells, I have this charger by Titanium Innovations, which comes highly recommended. See if I can get a model number on there. It just says LCD Rapid Battery Charger. But I think they only make one really comparable charger, so you'll know when you see it. Pila, or rather Maha, which is another company. This is my big charger for charging my big C and D Tenergy nymphs, but it will also take AA and AAA cells all the way down. This is a very expensive charger, and Maha also makes a smaller nymph charger intended for AA size nymphs like this. But in general, getting a good charger is usually another cost associated with going the lithium ion route, but also getting a good charger can help protect your batteries and, in turn protect your light. So I recommend looking at some reviews, asking other users kind of what their battery charging systems look like, just to get a sense for what you want. But in general, that's batteries. Again, check out Battery University, and absolutely post if you have any questions, and thanks a lot for watching.